no.
Welcome, one and all, to that show where some loser in their 30s overthinks a children's horror book from 25 years ago. Surely this will get me that Skillshare sponsorship. Alrighty, A Night in Terror Tower, let's jump into it. Our story opens with two siblings, Eddie and our narrator Sue, who are touring London by themselves while their parents are busy at a business conference. Their tour group's next stop is Terror Tower, formerly a prison from the 1400s, famous for its use of torture and executions. And right off the bat, R.L. Stine is flexing his research skills. This was London's first debtor prison, Mr. Starks explained as he led the way. If you were too poor to pay your bills, you were sent to prison, which meant you could never pay your bills, so you stayed in prison forever. This book is practically educational, talking about how Britain was once ruled by Rome and what bangers and mash are. Stine had some genuine interest in Britain and its history, and it shows on the page, indicating that R.L. had some actual passion for this book and didn't just pump it out over a weekend. That's a really good sign, and I entered A Night in Terror Tower pretty hopeful. As the kids and the rest of the tourists are led through the tower, the tour guide hams it up, explaining the tower's torture devices in gruesome detail, then telling a story of a Prince Edward and a Princess Susanna of York who were locked in the tower 500 years ago by their evil uncle, who planned to have them smothered to death so they couldn't claim his throne. On one hand, wow, book, you're revealing the twist super early. Eddie and Sue, Edward and Susanna, come on. The two kids aren't even like, hey, that's my name, because that would only make the obvious super obvious, but it's already super obvious. All you had to do was change one set of names, and the book's twist might actually surprise people. But on the other hand, this is also a case of R.L. Stine falling in love with his research, as this is obviously a riff on the Princes in the Tower, when Edward V and Richard of Shrewsbury, the two sons of King Edward IV, were locked away in the Tower of London by their uncle Richard. The brothers were never seen again, probably murdered, and Richard would end up taking the throne. It's an interesting idea inspired by history, instead of inspired by whatever Twilight Zone episode we're ripping off this time. It's just, you could have changed the names. We get a scene where Eddie steals Sue's camera from her pocket, establishing Eddie as a talented pickpocket, and then there's a scene where Sue notices a strange man at the back of the tour group, wearing a black cape and a large hat. Well, the two of them goof off for a little bit, and before you know it, they've been separated from the rest of the tour group, and they don't know the way out. They're trapped in Terror Tower. They try to retrace their steps, but find that strange man blocking their path. The stranger grabs the two kids and pulls out 3 white stones, starting what appears to be a magical ritual. I'm guessing 50-50 he's trying to summon Uk'otoa. Mumbling to himself, the man concentrated on the 3 smooth white stones. He piled one on top of the other. He let out an angry cry as one of the stones fell to the floor. It bounced once and slid across the smooth floor. I like this moment. It's such oddly human for Goosebumps. Ah, shit! I dropped my magic rocks, goddammit! Anyway, as the guy is grabbing at the scattered stones, the kids make a run for it, running through the Terror Tower's various spooky exhibits. The tower is basically one of those theme park haunted houses, which gives us good excuses for jump scares as fake skeletons reach out of cages and spooky pre-taped voices fill the halls. Eventually, Eddie and Sue find their way into the sewers, but get grabbed once again by the strange man. Just in the nick of time, a pack of rats charge through the tunnel, forcing the man to retreat, and the two siblings manage to get out of Terror Tower. Night has fallen, and the tour group is long gone, so the kids have a security guard call them a cab. The cab takes them back to the hotel, but when Sue tries to pay him with money their parents gave them, a bunch of coins, the cab driver says that this isn't real money. Upon closer inspection, they appear to be old-fashioned coins made of real precious metals, but that's not legal tender. Sue is confused. Why did their parents give them this weird money? The kids say they're going to run inside real quick, get their parents, and come down with the right amount of money. However, things get only more confusing. They go up to their room, expecting their parents to be done with the conference by now, but nobody's there. The room is unoccupied. Their luggage is missing. They go down to the front desk to see if the conference is still happening, but the clerk insists that there was never a conference going on. The more Eddie and Sue think on it, the more their reality starts to fall apart. They realize they don't remember their parents' names or what they look like. They don't remember their own last names either. And most shocking of all, they don't remember anything from before joining the London tour this morning. It's a very different kind of horror than the stuff in the tower. A creepy, existential dread as you realize that reality isn't what you thought it was. That you aren't who you thought you were. Eddie and Sue slip into the hotel's attached restaurant and try to work things out with a little bit of stress eating. The waiter brought a tray of tiny sandwiches, cut in triangles. I recognized egg salad and tuna fish. I didn't know what the others were, but Eddie and I didn't care. We started devouring the sandwiches as soon as the waiter set them down. We drank 2 cups of tea, then our next tray arrived with scones and croissants. We loaded them up with butter and strawberry jam and gobbled them down hungrily. Oh, maybe I should start a Binging with Babish-like show where I make foods from kids' books. Then I'll get that Skillshare sponsorship for sure. While having some food in their stomachs do calm the kids down a little bit, they did kind of forget about that cab driver who now comes into the restaurant looking for them. Unsure of what to do, Eddie and Sue dip into the back room, only to run headfirst into the strange man. The man demands the stones back because it turns out that Eddie pickpocketed them in their tussle. With nowhere to run, they give the stones back in hopes that the man will let them go, but instead he speaks an incantation, and the world goes black. Eddie and Sue find themselves in some stone building. A man in robes passes by and identifies it as an abbey. Thinking that this is another weird tourist thing, the kids wander around a bit until finding the dining room. I grabbed Eddie's arm as I stared in shock around the enormous room. 2 blazing fireplaces provided the only light. People in strange costumes sat in low benches around long wooden tables. A whole deer or an elk was turning on a spit, roasting over a fire in the center of the floor. The tables were piled high with food, meat, whole cabbages, green vegetables, fruits, whole potatoes, and foods I didn't recognize. I didn't see any plates and serving platters. The food was just strewn up over the long tables. People reached in and pulled out what they wanted. They ate noisily, talking loudly, laughing and singing, taking long drinks from metal wine cups, slapping the cups on the tabletop and toasting each other merrily. It's no coincidence that this scene happens so soon after the restaurant scene. Our protagonists have found themselves 500 years in the past, and the contrast between the clean, fancy late 20th century and the grimy, kind of gross 15th century via food drives the, well, horror might not be the right word. Tension, anxiety, disturbance. For whatever reason, the strange man isn't with them, so the kids leave the abbey and go exploring the town. And it's not long before the strange man, whom the townspeople identify as the Lord High Executioner, catches up with them. Eddie gets got, and Sue tries to use her fancy old-timey money to hide in a lady's house, but the lady takes the cash and sells her out to the executioner anyway, because you just don't mess with the Lord High Executioner. And so the kids are returned to Terror Tower, the real Terror Tower this time, being used for its intended purpose, as a place of imprisonment and torture. Eddie and Sue are imprisoned at the top of the tower to await some gruesome fate. A little while later, an older man with white hair, white beard, and a purple robe walks in. If you thought, wow, he looks just like a wizard, well, guess what? This is Morgred, the King's Sorcerer, and he's here to reveal what's going on. So Eddie and Sue are indeed Prince Edward and Princess Susanna. Oh, what a shock! And have been sentenced to die in Terror Tower by their uncle so that he can claim the throne. Not wanting to see the children killed, Morgred took those 3 white stones and used them to cast a time travel spell, sending the kids to the 1990s. He then erased their memories and created new, modern identities. Sure, identities with no parents. They had no support structure, and for some reason, Morgred gave them American identities, so they'd have to deal with being abandoned children with no legal identities in a foreign country, probably destined for a psychiatric hospital, what with all the missing memories. So, that's not ideal, but I suppose Morgred was rushed. He bothered to give them modern clothing and a couple of items like cameras, but failed to give them modern money. But I suppose they would have lived, and that was the important part. However, the Lord High Executioner caught wind of this, forcefully took the stones from Morgred, and followed the kids to the 1990s. I'm not 100% sure why. I get that this guy is proud of his job, but isn't this effectively the same as killing them? Edward and Susanna are gone. They can no longer claim the throne, and their uncle can do whatever he wants. Who cares if the kids are in the 90s now? Also, it's nice for the executioner to just let Morgred wander freely after committing treason against the king. Sure, the wizard doesn't have the stones and can't pull the time travel trick again, but as he presses his palms on our protagonist's heads and restores their memories, who can say what other tricks he might have up his sleeve? He should be in a cell. Really, this book was doing very well, and it's sad to see it bungled the ending. I really don't get what's going on here. Okay, so Edward reveals that he pulled his pickpocket trick again. He's stolen the stones from the executioner, so hooray, right? Except Morgred just refuses to do the spell again, and I cannot wrap my head around why. "It is my fondest wish to help you children," he whispered, "but if I help you escape again, the king will torture me and put me to a painful death, and then I will not be able to use my magic to help all of the people of Britain." Well, first off, letting 2 children die to save your own ass? Not a great look. Second, they know what you did the first time, and I do not understand why you're not being put to a painful death right now. But third and most important, we're about to find out that that's all bullshit. Because after revealing what the magic words of the time travel spell are, Edward just stacks the stones, says the magic words, and the kids and Morgred end up back in the 1990s London. And Morgred's like, "Oh, sweet, cool, yes, this is a good thing. I'll pretend to be your dad, and we have the stones so we can't be fall through time, and all our problems are solved." What is your deal, Morgred? A second ago you were all, "Boo-hoo, I can't help the kids because I need to be able to use my magic to help Britain." Well, you ain't helping Britain in 1994. We don't need your magic, wizard. We have indoor plumbing and commercial air flights and 3, count 'em, 3 live-action Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle movies. What could we possibly use you for? If you're cool with being in the 1990s now, why weren't you cool with it 5 minutes ago? 5 minutes ago in your personal relative time. God damn it, time travel. But yeah, the wizard changes his mind super quickly. I get that there needed to be a final conflict for the kids to overcome, but we can do better than this. What should have happened is that Morgred would be incapacitated in some way. The kids find him in the stocks or something, a situation where he wouldn't be able to cast any magic. You'd lose that bit where he restores Edward and Susanna's memories, but that's easy enough to work around. Just say that spending time in the 1400s gradually restores their memories. Done and done. Have Morgred incapacitated so that he can't help the kids, but he does feed them information on the spell, and it's up to them to pull the spell off before the executioner arrives to kill them. You've got a ticking clock element, a wizard who isn't a total wet towel. Maybe have it so that Susanna has some magic in her blood so that she has to be the one to cast the spell, because despite being the point of view character, Susanna has almost nothing to do in this book. Edward's all over here pickpocketing things left and right. He's got his thing. Give Susanna a thing. So yeah, the ending needs an overhaul. It's oddly weak, like Errol Stein got rushed at this part. Also, change the names of the royal children so that the mystery is better preserved. Don't give the game away so early. And that's all of my criticism, really. A Night in Terror Tower is a rather strong book for this series. R.L. Stein had some real interest in the subject matter of British history and culture, and you can totally feel that real-life passion on the page. I also really like how this book is structured, with 3 distinct chunks providing 3 different kinds of horror. You have the carnival horror house stuff in the tourist version of Terror Tower, a very hokey cornball horror that we've come to associate with Goosebumps. Then there's the middle third of this book, with the existential horror of Eddie and Sue realizing the flaws of their memories and how the reality they thought they knew is wrong. That's real psychological horror, in sharp contrast to what came before. Then the final third of the book provides a direct, violent threat to our protagonists. They're in a grimy, diseased past. They have no one to help them, and their lives are in danger. They are going to be killed. It's an escalation, and when you go back to the first third of the book, with its plastic skeletons and fake cobwebs, it feels almost cute. The book's theme, if Goosebumps could ever be said to have a theme, is how the passage of time sanitizes real-life horror, how we turn real tragedy and death and murder into sideshow entertainment. Sure, we don't rush to make entertainment out of recent deaths. We tend to call out works that do. But hey, it's been 50 years since Sharon Tate was killed by the Manson family. Let's have Quentin Tarantino put his pop spin on the story. Nobody's gonna shout too soon if you make a joke about President Lincoln's assassination, and telling stories about the witches of Salem is fun Halloween entertainment. You can take a tale of two children being murdered for political reasons 500 years ago and make a Goosebumps book about it today. And I don't think this is necessarily wrong to do, by the way. In fact, it's probably healthy to explore death and tragedy in a safe place like fiction, removed from it by time and words. Seeing the horrors of the past centuries after it happened lets us tap into that horror part of our brain while still being able to disengage, being able to step away and be like, oh, phew, I live now, in a time when kings are less likely to strangle their nieces and nephews. I'm safe. But that's where I think A Night in Terror Tower is really clever, because it's about real horror invading the safe horror we've made for ourselves. The Terror Tower in 1994 is a corny tourist attraction. The Terror Tower of the 1400s, the real Terror Tower that kills children, isn't going to stand for that. It's going to override this sideshow bullshit and show you true violence and terror. Guys, I really like this one. The weak ending and the giving up the twist right at the beginning keeps it from overtaking The Haunted School as my favorite Goosebumps book, but it's real close. A solid second placer. When you've got an author who actually cares of what he's writing about for once, you get something that engages and sparks the imagination. The structure is good. The research is solid. It has a variety of scares, so something will probably affect you. And there's some really interesting ideas at the core of this. This is a good book. I know it's not on brand to like a Goosebumps book, but I really like this Goosebumps book. I give A Night in Terror Tower a Skillshare sponsorship out of 10.